Something happened to me. And even now, I can't put it into words without feeling my stomach churn, as if there were still a cold hand pressing against my ribs from the inside. If you're listening to this, I only ask that you believe every detail, because that night, on a lost road in Louisiana, something entered my cabin, something that had no right to exist. I always enjoyed driving at dawn. The empty roads between Lafayette and the marshy areas near Atchafalaya gave me a strange sense of peace. The smell of wet pine, the sound of insects hitting the windshield, the thin mist rising from the swamp. It was all part of my routine. It was lonely, but I was used to solitude. After my ex-wife left, my truck became my home, my confessional, my punishment, and my solace. I was on my third consecutive shift, tired but alert. The engine purred as always, and the radio, which almost never picked up anything in that region, only emitted spaced-out static. Sometimes I talked to myself, just to ward off the silence. That night, however, I felt that any word I said would disturb the air inside the cabin, as if someone were listening. The first strange thing happened at 2:47 a.m. I remember exactly because I looked at the digital clock as soon as I felt it. The passenger seat sank. It wasn't a jolt, nor the abrupt movement of something sliding. It was the weight of someone sitting down, someone big, heavy, the kind of weight that makes the upholstery creak. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. I tried telling myself it could have been the change in the road's incline, a curve, any silly explanation, but the road was straight, completely straight. There was no reason for it. And then the smell came, a damp, strong, acidic smell, like a mixture of rotten mud, stagnant water, and something else. Something that resembled meat left in the sun. A smell that couldn't possibly get in there because my windows were closed and the air conditioning was blasting ice-cold air at full blast. I turned my head slowly, very slowly. I swear, on everything, that I didn't want to see anything. But I felt the presence so strong, so close, that my body acted on its own. There was nobody on the bench, but the upholstery remained sunken, as if a heavy, invisible shape remained there. And the smell, God. The smell seemed to worsen by the second, as if it were breathing, as if it were wet. My hands began to sweat. My breath became short, caught in my throat. I tried to keep my eyes on the road, but my vision kept searching for the rearview mirror. Something inside me, something primal, wanted to know if it had a face. I shouldn't have looked. In the rearview mirror, for less than a second, I saw a silhouette, tall, curved, faceless. It wasn't like one of those figures the brain invents. It had shape. It had volume. Its head tilted to the side, as if it were trying to observe me. The reflection disappeared the instant I blinked, but the bank remained in dire straits. I felt a chill run up the back of my neck, so intense that my eyes watered. I can't explain it, but it was as if the temperature around me had been drained away. I thought about stopping the truck. I swear I thought about it, but my arms froze on the steering wheel. It felt like if I slowed down, if I showed any sign of weakness, it would start moving, and I couldn't handle it. Not on that narrow road, with swamp on both sides, where the fog seemed to swallow everything except the headlights. For a minute, or an eternity, we drove side by side. Me and the invisible passenger. I tried to breathe through the corner of my mouth to avoid smelling it, but the smell seemed to seep into my eyes, my skin, my ears. The whole cabin was saturated. I felt involuntary tears burning my face. It wasn't crying. It was my body trying to expel the air. Then, the radio crackled. After hours of silence, it crackled so loudly I almost jumped out of my seat. And then, a voice emerged from behind the static. You... Yes. I didn't understand at first. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like all I could hear was that. But then the voice repeated itself, clearer, more desperate. "Help me. Please. Help me." My throat went dry. It couldn't be. That pipeline hadn't worked for decades. It was a pipeline that the old truck drivers said had been deactivated after a horrific accident in the 80s. And yet, someone was asking for help in it. The radio crackled again, louder now, making the metal of the doors rattle. The bank sank a little further, and I felt, for the first time, that what was there didn't just want company. I wanted attention. I should have turned the radio off. I should have ripped out the cable, disconnected the battery, something. But I couldn't move my hand. The static rose and fell like breathing, as if the device itself were alive. The voice kept emerging from behind the static, weak, distorted, but so human it hurt to hear. "Help me. Still. Here. Still here." I repeated those words in my head, trying to decipher them, trying to understand who, or what, was speaking to me on a dead channel since the 80s. I knew this because my father was a truck driver before me, and he told stories about this stretch of Louisiana. Stories of drivers who swore they heard cries for help coming from radios that were turned off, as if echoes of old accidents were trapped in the humid air of the swamps. I always thought it was old people's exaggeration, folklore, superstition. But that night, it didn't seem like folklore. As the voice spoke, I felt the air in the cabin change. It became heavier, as if the oxygen had thickened, as if each breath was drawn through water, and along with that, the smell. My God, that smell of rotten lagoon became so strong I could almost taste it in my mouth. Metal, rust, mud, and something sweet in the background, like rotting fruit. The passenger seat sank a little further, and this time the upholstery made a low sound, almost a groan. I could clearly hear the weight adjusting, as if it had changed position. Terror surged up my spine like an animal, scratching at every vertebra. I didn't want to look. I swear I tried to force myself to keep my eyes on the road, but the rearview mirror seemed to call to me. It was as if I could feel the gaze of that presence, trying to capture me, trying to pull me in to recognize it. And I looked. For a moment, I thought there was nothing there. The fog created by the headlights danced on the glass, forming shadows that moved like fingers. But then the interior mirror vibrated, as if someone had blown near it, and the silhouette appeared again. This time it's clearer, too tall to be an ordinary person inside a truck. Hunched over, shoulders slumped, head tilted to one side, as if she were examining the movements of my face. No features, no eyes, no mouth, just the outline. And even so, I felt that she was smiling. The radio crackled again. The voice became clearer, but much more desperate. "I didn't leave. I didn't leave." A sharp interference cut off the long, painful sentence, as if someone was scratching metal inside the device. My vision blurred. The pressure inside the cabin increased so much that my ears began to ring. I swallowed hard and felt the strong taste of rust in my throat. I tried to speak. Anything. But my voice came out trembling, almost childlike. "Who's there?" The radio responded immediately. So quickly it seemed to be listening to me, understanding me. "I am trapped. Taken." That word triggered something inside me. Fear, pity, confusion, a suffocating mix. I tried to rationalize it. It could be interference, some truck driver messing around. But it didn't make sense. No modern equipment used that channel. The line itself had been removed from nearby towers. It was impossible. But the impossible was sitting right next to me. When the truck jolted along a narrow stretch of road, I felt the entire cab vibrate. Not from the asphalt, but from the weight of the thing beside me. It was like sharing the space with something that occupied more than a human body could. It was as if the presence was too dense. I forced myself to take a deep breath. It was a mistake. The air that entered burned from the inside, as if it had passed through hot mud. Nausea hit instantly, and I clenched my teeth to keep from vomiting. The cabin was so saturated with that smell that it felt like I was breathing inside the swamp itself. The radio crackled again, and this time the voice came out so close, so clear, that it seemed to be whispered directly in my ear. "Can you listen to me?" I trembled. My whole skin crawled. The seat sank again. I felt the truck tilt slightly to the right. That's when I realized something terrible. The presence wasn't just about sitting. She was approaching me, as if he had turned his body, leaning closer, as if he wanted to touch it, or to smell, or to put it better. I tried to engage the truck's gear to accelerate, but my hand didn't have the strength to hold the gear. The steering wheel slipped a little from my sweaty palm. Then the radio stopped. Absolute silence. The kind of silence that doesn't exist in a moving truck. The kind of silence that steals all sounds. And in that silence, very close, so close that I felt the cold warmth of his breath on my skin. Something murmured, without the radio, "Don't leave me alone." The entire cabin seemed to contract, as if it had been squeezed from the outside. The interior lights flickered, dancing like candles about to go out. And I was certain, absolute certainty, that it wasn't just asking for help. That thing was choosing its company. The road seemed narrower and narrower, as if darkness were closing in around me, swallowing both sides of the road, obscuring the world outside the cone of the headlights. The fog rising from the swamp was so dense it seemed alive, rising in slow waves, creeping across the car body, crawling across the windshield like hands searching for openings. And the worst part is that the cabin was colder. Cold in a way that didn't make sense for the humid climate of Louisiana. Cold as a morgue corridor. It was the kind of cold that didn't come from air conditioning. It came from somebody. The radio remained silent, but I felt the presence sitting beside me, heavy, wet, leaning toward me. I felt my arm brush against the air as if I had bumped into something that wasn't there. My heart raced. I knew I hadn't touched anything physical, but the thermal shock of it was real. It was like touching skin submerged in still water for hours. My breath became short, and a buzzing began to form in my head, as if the silence itself were pressing on my eardrums. And then I felt it. One touch. Live. Wet. Cold. It was on the inside of my forearm, near the elbow. The exact sensation of fingers. Long, thin fingers, cold as mud freshly squeezed from water. I pulled my arm so hard that I hit my elbow on the dashboard. The pain brought me back for a second, but the panic didn't subside. The smell of rotting mud intensified so much that my eyes burned. And along with it, a sound. It didn't come from the radio. It wasn't coming from the road. It seemed to be coming from inside the cabin. A damp, bubbling sound, as if something was submerged and trying to speak through murky water. Each bubble looked like a drowned vowel. My stomach turned. The seat sank again. It wasn't just the weight of something sitting on anymore. Now it was movement. Tew felt the upholstery was warping, as if that passenger were shifting position to get closer. Almost as if he were trying to see me from a better angle. My peripheral vision was blurry. I was afraid to look in the rearview mirror, but not being able to look seemed even worse. The feeling of being watched burned in the back of my neck, and against all rationality, I looked. The silhouette was still there. But now, it was closer. Much closer. The head was tilted, not just to the side, but forward, as if the whole body were bending toward me. The outline seemed to throb, as if it were too damp, like soaked clothing dripping. A dark liquid slowly trickled from the area where the face should have been. Suddenly my hands went numb. The voice, if I can call it that, returned. But now it wasn't a cry for help. It had no human form. It was air being drawn in the wrong way. It was breathing that imitated people, but without understanding how human breathing works. The sound filled me with such profound revulsion that I felt the nausea rising again. It was like listening to someone trying to imitate life. And then, the cabin lights flickered. Once, twice, and they almost passed out. The entire truck vibrated as if something was lightly tapping the back of the cab. It wasn't wind, it wasn't road impact. And with each vibration, the seat sank further. I realized I'd started muttering, "No, no, no," without realizing it. My hands gripped the steering wheel as if it were the only solid thing in that nightmare. That's when I realized the road had disappeared. Not entirely, but the headlights didn't reach more than 2 meters ahead. The darkness was so thick, it was as if I were driving inside a tunnel of smoke. The air became more humid, so humid it felt like I was breathing the inside of a lake. The windows fogged up on the inside. And then, 3 sharp knocks on the passenger window. Tock, tock, tock. The sound wasn't human. It had no natural rhythm. It was as if bony, nailless fingers were testing the surface, trying to get in. I turned slowly, against all my will, and saw nothing visible. But the mark remained. 3 streaks of dirty water ran down the glass, as if something wet had pressed against it. I felt panic gripping my chest. I wanted to pray, but the only thing that came out of my mouth was a trembling sob. The radio burst into static, high, fortissimo, and amidst the hissing, the voice returned, but now distorted, like something that was sinking as it spoke. "Don't go away. Stay with me. Here." The entire cabin seemed to breathe. And I realized, with such horror that I almost lost control of the truck, that the presence did not want to be ignored. She wanted to be remembered. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to stay. I always thought I knew those roads. I'd spent half my life hauling cargo between Baton Rouge, Lafayette, and the more remote areas of Louisiana. But that night, I was absolutely certain I was in a place that doesn't exist on any map. The darkness in front of the truck was unusual. It wasn't just a lack of lighting. It was as if the road had been swallowed by something alive, dense, that absorbed the light from the headlights before it touched the asphalt. I kept my foot firmly on the accelerator, but it felt like I wasn't going anywhere. As if the landscape had stopped, or worse, as if it were watching me. The air inside the cabin was so humid that my clothes stuck to my skin. And the smell. My God, the smell was so strong it was almost solid. It was like being inside a barrel of putrid water, mixed with old blood and rusted metal. I couldn't feel my hands properly anymore. The steering wheel felt incredibly cold, as if it had been submerged in ice for hours. My whole body was trembling, not just from fear, but from the cold. A cold that seemed to come from the passenger seat. From the weight there, from that thing that wouldn't go away. And then I felt movement again. Something tilted, slowly. With the calculated slowness of someone who doesn't want to scare their prey, or wants to take advantage of their fear. The upholstery creaked. The truck tilted slightly to the right, but enough for me to feel my body fall. The presence was closer, almost touching my shoulder. I held my breath involuntarily, and in that second of absolute silence, I heard a sound behind me. It was the curtain of the truck bed, swinging, even with the air still. And then, a slow dragging, like soaked fabric being pulled by fingers. My heart raced so fast that I felt pain in my chest. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to turn my face away. But the sound continued, dragging, scratching the rubber floor, approaching the cabin like something crawling across the floor. When I finally mustered the courage to peek out of the corner of my eye, I saw only the curtain trembling, as if something were breathing behind it. That's when I realized there was more than one thing going on with me. The radio voice returned, but now it seemed to be coming from 3 places at once: the speaker, the seat next to me, and the back of the cabin. "No. Leave. Me. I'll stay. Here." The words came out interrupted, as if someone were speaking with water filling their mouth. The wet noise between each syllable made me want to vomit. The passenger seat sagged again, deeply. The upholstery sank as if a huge body had turned completely towards me. I felt the presence touch my arm, but this time, it wasn't just a touch. I felt heavy. I felt long fingers slide across my skin, leaving a trail as icy as burning ice. I instinctively backed away and almost veered into the oncoming lane. "That's enough. Get out. Get out of here." My voice came out hoarse and broken. The thing next to me froze for a second, and it was at that moment that the curtain behind me opened. Not entirely, only about 5 centimeters, but enough for me to see something. One hand, emerging through the fabric, a hand that was too white, wrinkled, with skin that looked like it was about to dissolve into water. The fingers were thin, long, and dripping. Each drop that fell made a precise sound on the cabin floor, as if they were too heavy to be just water. The person on the bench shifted instantly, as if they had become irritated, offended, or with jealousy. The radio hissed so loudly that my ears popped, and then the 2 voices blended together. "Don't let... Stay. Stay. With me. With me. With me." The road has completely disappeared from the headlights. There was only darkness, a tunnel of absolute darkness. My chest tightened so much that I thought I was going to faint. That's when something even worse happened. The truck began to slow down, alone. I stepped on the gas pedal with all my might. Nothing. The pedal was stiff, as if it were stuck. I engaged the gear manually, but felt resistance, as if something was holding the transmission back. And in that darkness, in that feeling of being dragged into a place that is not of this world, I heard steps. Footsteps outside the cabin. Boards. Heavy. Sinking water with every step. Hair. 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 They were coming from the driver's side, getting closer until they stopped right next to me. The presence inside the cabin remained motionless, as if it were waiting. The doorknob moved, slowly, as if someone were testing it. And at that moment, I understood. It wasn't just one entity. It wasn't just an echo of the past. It was something that found a target. And that target was me. The swamp behind him seemed to breathe, as if it had enormous lungs hidden beneath the dark water. Danny ran to the cab and locked himself inside it, but it didn't feel safe. It was as if he had just closed the door of a cage and was on the wrong side of the bars. The passenger seat was completely soaked. The foam inside seemed to have absorbed water from the swamp itself, dripping a dark liquid onto the rubber floor mat. Danny stared at the sunken fabric, marked in a way that painfully reminded him of the weight of something that had sat there, something that was no longer there. He turned the key. The engine coughed, resisted, and finally started. The dashboard lights flickered. "Come on, old man. Come on, it only works," he murmured. The road swallowed the truck back, but it no longer seemed the same. The fog danced as if it had a will of its own, opening and closing small passages. At every turn, Danny smelled that stench of rotten pond again, even with all the windows closed. When she glanced in the rearview mirror, her stomach clenched. The silhouette was there again, no face, sitting directly on the wet depression of the passenger seat. Danny didn't turn his head. He didn't have the courage. He just kept his eyes fixed on the road, but his breathing began to quicken. "I don't want you here," he whispered, unsure if he was speaking to the entity or to himself. The radio made a hissing sound. Then it hissed again, and, as if something had reconnected invisible threads, the same submerged voice repeated itself. "Help. Help. Help." But there was a new detail. The voice no longer seemed distant. It was no longer underwater. Now it was clear, almost too close. On his side, the truck vibrated violently, veering a few centimeters into the oncoming lane. Danny corrected the steering wheel with a jerk, his heart racing. "That's enough!" he shouted. "What do you want?" The radio responded with a heavy silence, a profound silence, and then, "To go back." Danny swallowed hard. Back to where? The passenger seat sank further, as if the thing were tilting forward. The entire cabin seemed to shrink, and a drop of dark water trickled slowly down the doorframe. The smell of mud filled the air, suffocatingly so. The voice replied, "To the swamp." An image invaded Danny's mind, not as a memory, but as if someone had planted the thought inside him. He saw an overturned car, half submerged, headlights broken, and a hand weakly tapping against the glass before disappearing into the muddy water. "You were the driver?" Danny asked, his voice barely audible. The silhouette moved, slowly, and something cold touched his shoulder. Not a finger, but something like the edge of a hand swollen from the water. "Do you want me to find the car?" Danny said, trembling. Silence. But the weight in the passenger seat lessened, as if the entity were receding. The fog on the road seemed to part, revealing a dirt detour Danny had never noticed before. A narrow path that led straight into the darkness of the swamp. The radio crackled one last time. "Help." Danny turned the truck around to take the detour. Not because I wanted to, but because he understood. The thing didn't just want to come back. She wanted to be found. And deep down, Danny knew that certain souls don't find rest while their bodies are still trapped in darkness, especially in a land like Louisiana, where everything that dies keeps waiting. He put it in first gear and drove on, the headlight illuminating the sleeping swamp. Behind him, the passenger seat finally straightened out of its sagging position, but the smell of the lagoon lingered, because some presences never truly leave the truck. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't explain it. I've never been one to believe those road stories, the kind truckers tell just to pass the time at the gas station. But that morning, in that damn emergency lane in Wyoming, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see, and the more I try to forget, the more it feels like it's following me. I was on my third day of the trip, transporting mechanical parts to a factory in Billings. The deadline was tight, and I had already received 2 messages from my supervisor saying that if I was late again, they would reevaluate my performance. Nice words to say that I was about to be fired. So I drove all night, even with my eyes burning and my mind heavy, in that way that only those who live on the road understand. The temperature dropped quickly, and the fog began to form as if it were rising from the asphalt. First a thin veil, then a white wall. I slowed down without even noticing. The radio crackled, lost signal, came back, and then went completely silent, as if the road had swallowed the sound. It was almost 3 in the morning. No cars behind me, no cars coming from the opposite direction. Just me, and that unsettling feeling that the night was different, too dense, almost alive. I tried to distract myself. I thought about my daughter, Olivia, who had turned 9 last week. I promised I'd be there, and I failed again. Her mother wasn't even answering my calls anymore. The truth, I felt like a ghost in my own family's life. Perhaps that's why the road was the only place where I still understood who I was. But that morning, even the road didn't seem to recognize me. The fog grew so thick it felt like it was inside the cabin. The spotlight illuminated only a few meters and then faded, as if the light had been swallowed by an invisible mouth. And then came the first sign that something was wrong. A movement. To the left. Stopped in the emergency lane. At first, I thought it was a small animal, maybe a deer, a lost dog, I don't know. But when I got a little closer, I realized there was a silhouette of someone small. I squinted, trying to see better through the dirty glass and the fog. The figure wasn't moving. He wasn't waving. He didn't ask for help. I was just standing there, completely still. A shiver ran down the back of my neck, so cold I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end. "It can't be," I murmured, gripping the steering wheel tightly. But it was a child, stopped in the emergency lane, as if waiting for me. My heart started beating faster. The first thing I thought was that maybe there was a car accident nearby, some desperate parent looking for help. But I couldn't see anything else but her small, thin silhouette, leaning toward the road as if she were trying to listen for what was coming from my direction. I took my foot off the gas pedal. The tires squealed softly on the wet asphalt. The truck slowed down until it almost came to a stop, and there, just when my headlights finally illuminated her face, she disappeared. It didn't happen. It didn't turn around. He didn't go down the embankment. She simply wasn't there anymore. My whole body froze. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that I felt my knuckles crack. I blinked several times, trying to believe I had seen it wrong. Perhaps it was just a tree trunk, a reflection, my tired mind playing tricks on me. But even trying to rationalize it, something inside me knew that wasn't it. That figure, that presence, it hadn't been a misperception. It had been real, tangible, disturbing. The truck continued moving forward slowly, almost crawling along the road, and it was there, in that moment of absolute silence, that I first felt a kind of pressure in the air, as if the fog itself were watching. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heartbeat. "Just exhaustion," I whispered to myself. "You're tired. That's all." But the road remained far too quiet, and the feeling that I wasn't alone only got worse. I wanted to believe it was just my tired mind. I needed to believe it, because if it wasn't that, then I really had seen a child alone in the emergency lane at 3 a.m, enveloped in a fog that seemed to swallow everything. And that idea unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. I kept driving, trying to breathe deeply, trying to convince myself that it was all nothing serious. But my body wouldn't believe me. The back of my neck was still covered in goosebumps, as if something hot and cold at the same time was hovering behind me. That kind of feeling you can't justify. He knows. Something is wrong. The radio tried to come back to life for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of choppy static, as if some hidden voice were trying to cut through the hiss. And then, silence again. I tapped the dashboard. No response. The road remained empty, endless, as if repeating itself. And the worst part, the fog seemed to follow me, as thick as a theater curtain. I don't know how much time has passed. 10 minutes, 20, half an hour. All I know is that sleepiness began to weigh on me. The steering wheel trembled slightly in my hands, and I blinked more than I should have. A truck driver knows when he's nearing his limit, and I was too close. I started looking for a place to pull over, any resting area. But before I found it, before I even processed it, she was there again, exactly in the same position, exactly the same distance from the headlights. The child, standing in the emergency lane, looking at me. My blood ran cold. My foot slammed on the brakes before I could even think. "No, no, no, no," I murmured, my breath quickening. The truck shuddered, braking hard. The tires screeched on the wet asphalt. My eyes burned as I tried to see any detail. But it didn't make sense. I had driven for miles. I had driven through curves, climbs, long stretches, and straightaways. There was no way she could be there again, in the same position, as if she had never moved. My body started to tremble. A drop of sweat slid down my temple, despite the cold. "What are you?" I whispered without realizing it. The silhouette was frail, small, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. What struck me was the way her head was slightly tilted, as if trying to understand me. I wanted to honk the horn. I wanted to scream. I wanted to do anything to break that moment. But I just couldn't. Then something happened that I will never forget. The child tilted their head a little more, slowly, very slowly, as if she were curious. And then she took a step forward. My heart stopped for a second, just a second, but it was enough to take my breath away. I blinked, an involuntary reflex, and when I opened my eyes, she disappeared again. He hadn't run. He hadn't moved away. She simply wasn't there anymore. And it was at that exact moment that I realized something terrible. When she disappeared, the mist around her seemed to twist and turn, as if something had moved inside her, something I couldn't see, but I could feel. The sensation became so strong, so suffocating, that I had to pull over. My hands were shaking, and for a second I thought I was going to vomit. I pulled the truck over to the side of the road, tried to catch my breath, and rested my head on the steering wheel. The silence was absolute, but it didn't last long. Outside, for the first time that morning, I heard something. Very low, very delicate, very human. It was as if a child were whispering words I couldn't understand. But right next to the cabin door, I didn't have the courage to look. I stood there for a few seconds, maybe minutes, completely still, my forehead pressed against the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. That whisper outside was so soft it could just be the wind, but I knew it wasn't. Wind does not form syllables. The wind does not repeat its rhythms. The wind doesn't seem to be blowing. Call someone. I held my breath involuntarily, and when I let go, the back of my neck went cold, as if someone was right behind me, almost touching my hair. But I was alone. I had to be alone. "Breathe, man. Breathe," I murmured, trying to maintain my sanity. I opened the window just a crack, to see if I could hear better. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe it was an echo. Maybe it was just any explanation my mind could still accept. But the sound stopped. Instantly. How if whatever was there had realized that I was trying to listen. A second later, the fog in the rearview mirror shifted. Just a slow drag. As if something were walking inside her, but without a defined shape. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, and that's when the truck's headlights flashed twice, without me touching anything. First, a slight oscillation, then a quick blackout, and then they returned, illuminating the road for a few meters. I was so nervous that I barely noticed when I started driving again. It was as if my body was trying to escape on its own, without needing my mind. The road stretched out again beneath the headlights. The fog grew denser, as if it were accumulating in front of me. And then, in the middle of that white spiral, I saw the silhouette again. The child. In the middle of the track. This time, right in front of me. I braked so hard I almost hit my head on the dashboard. The truck slid across the wet asphalt, losing control. The tires spun, tearing up the road in a scream that sounded human. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" I yelled, gripping the steering wheel so hard I felt something snap in my wrist. For an instant, a microsecond, she was there. And I saw it. I saw her shape clearly. Long, wet hair, soaked clothes, clinging to the small body, barefoot, arms hanging limply, as if she didn't have the strength to hold them up. And the face. I couldn't see his face. The fog seemed to protect him. But the tilting of the head, it still gives me chills just thinking about it. The truck swerved on its own, as if a greater force were pulling the steering wheel. I completely lost control. I felt the back of the trailer whip around, shifting the weight to the wrong side. The world has become a blur, light, fog, metal, sound. And then, a dry impact. The cabin lurched, shaking everything inside. A box fell behind me and hit the wall as if someone had punched the metal. The truck slid a few more meters until it stopped on the shoulder. I sat there, breathing deeply, trying not to faint. My heart felt like a hammer pounding in my chest, erratic and desperate. I glanced quickly through the windshield, but I couldn't see anything anymore. Nothing on the track, nothing on the shoulder of the road. Nothing but the fog growing, drawing closer, as if it were rearranging itself around me. I placed my trembling hand on the doorknob to check if I had run someone over. But before I could open it, I heard something. Inside the cabin. A snap. Then another one. And another. As if tiny fingers were touching the plastic of the dashboard. Slowly. Rhythmic. Like someone testing a new surface. No, it can't be. My voice came out weak, childish, almost a sob. I turned my head slowly, my stomach turning to ice. And that's when I noticed, on the fogged-up windshield, right in front of me, handprints began to appear, small, symmetrical, and coming from within from cabins. I couldn't breathe. Each mark appeared slowly, as if imprinted by the warm vapor of a child's breath. A little help here. Another one next to it, another one above, as if something, or someone, were leaning against the glass. Then, a hand slipped down, from top to bottom. It was like a child sliding their palm across the windshield, trapped inside with me. And then, very close to my face, two hands positioned themselves inside the glass, as if something was trying to get a better look at who I was. I closed my eyes, trembling, unable to react. The softest sound I've ever heard echoed inside the cabin. "Why did you deviate?" The voice was so close, it felt like it was whispering directly in my ear. I didn't know the answer. I couldn't even do it. My throat was completely locked up. That question, that small, weak, almost gentle voice, sounded so close that my ears tingled. But what truly terrified me wasn't the sound, it was heat. Because when the voice whispered, "Why did you turn away?" the air beside me warmed for 3 seconds, as if someone were there, someone alive, breathing beside me. I opened my eyes slowly, very slowly. Slower than I ever imagined a human being could open their eyes. Handprints were still on the windshield, but now they were spreading, not as if someone were pressing them hard, but as if small hands were going through the glass. Oh, my God, the sound. Small los lose. Soft, light, almost playful sounds resonated through the dashboard, and each touch caused a new mark to appear on the fogged glass. I was breathing so fast I thought I was going to faint. My head was throbbing, and the cabin seemed smaller than it actually was, as if it were closing in around me. My first rational thought was, "Get out of here, now." But something inside me knew that no matter where I went, it was already done, with me. I unbuckled my seatbelt with a trembling hand. The click of the zipper echoed so loudly in the silence that it almost made me scream. In the reflection of the side window, I saw movement. Small, fleeting shadows, like footsteps of someone crossing the passenger seat. But I didn't hear any footsteps. I only felt the presence. I slowly turned my face towards the seat next to me, and the bank was sunken, as if someone were sitting there. The fabric was lightly pressed, perfectly conforming to the shape of a small, slender body. The mark was so subtle, so real, that it seemed impossible to deny. And for a moment, I saw not the whole body, not the face, just a part. A strand of hair, black and wet, trickled down the edge of the seat. A thin, stuck together, dripping strand of hair. The sound of the drop falling on the carpet echoed louder than it should have. Plock. I recoiled against the door, breathless, weak, voiceless. What? What do you want from me? My voice came out in a desperate whisper. The bench next to it sank a little further, as if the thing was leaning forward. The hands on the windshield stopped, all at the same time. And that was worse than seeing them move, because a second later, in the middle of that suffocating silence, something touched my shoulder. It wasn't violent. It wasn't a tug. It wasn't a slap. It was smooth, a small hand, free, wet. He touched me as if he wanted my attention. I screamed. I screamed in a way that I don't even recognize as my own. I opened the door and fell onto the shoulder of the road, hitting my knee on the hard ground. The fog was denser than ever, as if the air had become physical. I tried to see, I tried to run, but my eyes burned and my legs were weak. I turned to look at the cabin, perhaps out of instinct, perhaps out of stupidity. And that's when I saw something I would have preferred to erase from my memory. The hands, now on the outside of the windshield. They trickled slowly down, as if something whole was sliding down the glass, coming after me. "This isn't real. This isn't real," he repeated, trying to convince me. But the fog moved. It moved as if something large and light had passed through it toward me. This time, it wasn't the silhouette of a child. It was something taller, more crooked, more contorted. I felt it. I felt it reach the edge of the truck. Do you feel the weight or not? The cold seeping into my chest. I stumbled backward, nearly falling down the embankment. I leaned against a rock, breathing as if I were drowning. And then I listened. Not a voice, not a whisper. One rice, short, low, children's, but broken. As if the throat that was trying to produce that sound had already been destroyed long before. The fog swallowed the sound, and then something moved closer. So close I could smell it. Smell of stagnant water. It smells musty. It smells like wet clothes that have been there for days. I closed my eyes, begging for it to end, but the voice returned. Clearer, closer, more real. "You saw me." "And I swear on everything," she whispered as if she was smiling. I should have run. I knew I had to run. But my legs wouldn't respond. It was like trying to control someone else's body. The air felt too heavy, too humid, too dense to enter my lungs. The fog before me trembled, opening and closing as if it were breathing. And then I saw him. First, just an outline, then a slow movement, too slow for a human. The shadow leaned out of the mist as if letting me see it, as if it wanted to be seen. She was tall, but crooked. Her shoulders slumped at impossible angles. His arms were too long, ending in small hands, too small for that body. And each finger dripped dirty water, forming dark puddles on the asphalt. The smell of dead, soaked things hit me hard. No, I stammered, not knowing what I was trying to say. The shadow took a step, just one step. But the sound of that footstep, my God, it wasn't the sound of a foot hitting the ground. It was the sound of something falling into the water, as if the ground beneath her didn't exist. The fog seemed to tremble when that thing came close enough for me to see the face better, or what appeared to be a face. There was hair. The same black hair, wet, stuck together. There was skin, but it was too pale, too swollen, cracked as if it had been left under ice water for too long. And there were eyes, Two eyes so deep-set they seemed not to belong to that body. They didn't shine. They reflected no light at all. They were just standing there, staring at me without blinking, as if they were analyzing me. "You saw me," he repeated, in a whisper that vibrated inside my head, not in the air. I stepped back, stumbling on the damp ground. The edge of the ravine was just inches behind me. If I took one more wrong step, I would fall. "I didn't want to," I murmured, trembling, almost pleading. I swear I didn't want to." The smile slowly spread across her face, a crooked, awkward smile, as if the face had been broken apart and hastily reassembled. "I should have gone straight past it." The voice came out crackling, with parts failing, like a scratched recording. "You deviated. You saw. And whoever sees—" His body leaned forward, drawing closer to my face. "Takes it with them." The hand, that small, cold, wet hand, slowly moved up to my chest. And when it touched my heart, I felt as if ice had entered my veins. My body began to go numb. The view darkened at the edges. The fog seemed to close in around the two of us. Then, a sound shattered everything. A horn, high, strong, real. The light from another truck pierced the fog, illuminating everything for a second. And in that second, things receded. He didn't run away. It didn't disappear. She just bent backward, writhing as if the light hurt her. The smile disappeared. His eyes sank even further into the darkness of his face. And the voice, now distant, almost sad, murmured, "I'll come back when you're alone." The fog swallowed her as if she were made of smoke. I tried to breathe. I tried to get up. I tried to say something to the truck driver, who came running down to help me. But when I looked at the windshield of my truck, the hands, dozens of them, were still there. New, fresh, wet. And on the glass, written with a small, soggy finger, was a phrase, "I know the way."